The future of climate policy in America, impacts of the new reconciliation bill. Climate policy in America, where we go from here. The shocking reality, America's clean energy future in jeopardy. On July 4th, President Trump signed the Republican reconciliation bill into law, effectively gutting many of the country's most significant clean energy tax credits. The future of the American solar, wind, battery, and electric vehicle industries looks drastically different now than it did last year. The question on everyone's mind, what's next? In this episode of Shift Key, we delve into the aftermath of this policy change and explore the implications for the country's economic competitiveness and the climate fight. Joining us is Jillian Goodman, Heatmap's deputy editor, as we discuss the law's final version, what's still up for grabs, and how this shift will impact the industry. The fallout, what's been lost, and what's still in play. The law's repeal of clean energy tax credits has left many feeling dizzy and disheartened. But here's where it gets controversial. How much of this change is a result of political maneuvering, and how much is a genuine attempt to reform the energy sector? As we navigate the complexities of this policy change, we must ask ourselves, what does this mean for the future of American innovation and global competitiveness? A break from the chaos, how climate professionals cope. For those working on the front lines of climate policy, the past 2 weeks have been a whirlwind of emotions. We asked our guests how they're feeling about the climate fight today. Jillian Goodman's response? Dizzy. Jenkins, a professor of energy systems engineering at Princeton University, echoed her sentiments, saying, "I would like a break." But here's the thing, as professionals, they can't afford to let emotions get in the way of progress. So, how do they cope with the uncertainty and frustration? The human side of climate policy. Meyer, Heatmap's executive editor, posed a thought-provoking question. How do we separate our personal feelings about climate change from our professional work? Jillian Goodman's response was telling. Doing this work is sort of my way of processing my climate anxiety. I think about it as a professional, and I don't really think about it as a human as often. But what happens when the lines between personal and professional blur? The road ahead, new approaches and controversies. As we move forward, one thing is clear, the approach to climate policy must change. The government's willingness to undo years of progress is a stark reminder that we can't rely on the same strategies. So, what's next? Jenkins put it bluntly, this is a terrible piece of policy for the United States and for the world. But what alternatives do we have? And how can we ensure that our approach is motivated by more than just political expediency? The bigger picture, broader implications, and unanswered questions. As we grapple with the consequences of this policy change, we must consider the broader implications. What does this mean for the automotive sector, for example? And what about the deficit, health insurance, and food stamp spending? The questions are endless and the answers are far from clear. Resources and further reading. For those interested in diving deeper, we've included links to the Repeat Project report, the Bipartisan Policy Center's Foreign Entities of Concern Explainer, and the new White House Executive Order on Renewables Tax Credits. Additionally, you can find more of Heatmap's coverage on the OBBBA bill and its implications. This episode of Shift Key is sponsored by the Yale Center for Business and the Environment's online clean energy programs equip you with tangible skills and powerful networks, and you can continue working while learning. In just 5 hours a week, propel your career and make a difference. Music for Shift Key is by Adam Cromlow. Subscribe to Shift Key and find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also add the show's RSS feed to your podcast app to follow us directly. Trump's climate bill. How the Megabill will increase U.S. emissions by 8%. Imagine if a single piece of legislation could undo years of progress in fighting climate change. That's exactly what the big, beautiful bill signed into law by President Trump earlier this month seems poised to do. But here's where it gets controversial. This bill not only undermines existing efforts to reduce emissions, but also actively promotes the use of fossil fuels, setting us back on our path to a sustainable future. Recent models from climate experts predict a significant increase in U.S. emissions as a result of this legislation. For instance, a study by the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, C2ES, suggests that emissions could rise by 8% more than they would have otherwise. Brad Townsend, the group's vice president for policy and outreach, emphasized the gravity of this number, stating, "An 8% increase in emissions is a substantial amount, especially considering all the work done over the past 2 decades to reduce them." He further explained that this bill effectively rolls back 1/3 of the progress made in cutting emissions with just one signature. The bill accomplishes this rollback in several ways. Firstly, it eliminates tax credits that incentivize the adoption of renewable energy sources like wind and solar power, as well as electric vehicles. Secondly, it scraps programs designed to fund low-carbon and anti-pollution initiatives, particularly in underprivileged communities. Lastly, it provides tax incentives for oil, gas, and coal industries and opens up more areas for drilling on public lands and offshore regions. To put these impacts into perspective, a Princeton University model indicates that without the bill, U.S. emissions would decrease by 32% by 2035 compared to 2005 levels. However, with the bill in place, emissions are projected to drop by only 25%. If Biden-era policies, including stricter regulations, had remained intact, emissions could have fallen between 40 and 44%. Another analysis by the Rhodium Group echoes similar findings. They estimate that without the bill, emissions would be 31 to 51% lower in 2035 compared to 2005. However, due to the bill, emissions reductions are now expected to be between 27 and 44%. Ben King, the lead author of this study, highlighted the stark difference, noting that this equates to an additional 575 million metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2035 alone. To visualize this, imagine adding another 134 million gas-powered cars to the roads for a year. This legislation raises important questions about the balance between economic growth and environmental sustainability. While supporters argue that the bill will stimulate the economy by boosting fossil fuel production, critics contend that it sacrifices long-term environmental health for short-term gains. What do you think? Is the bill a necessary step towards economic recovery, or does it jeopardize our ability to address climate change effectively? Stay tuned for more updates on how this bill and other policies will shape the future of energy and the environment.